On the surface, Dark Souls and Golf with Your Friends may seem like very different games and experiences, but upon closer inspection, they're actually closer to one another than you might think. Barring the glaring difference of the fact that you're golfing and not fighting giant bosses, both games provide a challenging yet rewarding single-player and multiplayer experience, with both also at times causing more frustration than they are worth. Both games provide a wide variety of environments and spaces to play with, which breaks up the monotony. Finally, the most significant similarities are that both games have fairly obscure lore related to both characters and locations. The most important difference between the two, however, is that Golf with Your Friends does not have items and descriptions with which the lore can be pieced together. Rather, you must use contextual clues in the environment to understand the lore of the Cuck Lords of Golf with Your Friends. In this video, we'll be exploring the hidden lore of the most significant lords in gaming, and comparing them to their Dark Souls counterparts. In the beginning, there were the Lord Souls, which found their way into vessels. These lords created their kingdoms, and then proceeded to panic once their kingdoms became threatened. This may sound like an oversimplified version of the Dark Souls story, but it is in fact the story structure for Golf with Your Friends. The primary difference between the lords in the games is the lords of the Cuck can take whatever form they so choose. This is why the player sees so much diversity among them as they traverse the halls. And this is also why they seem so different from one another, and often seem disconnected, a clear difference between them and the lords of Dark Souls. Now, let us explore who these lords are. One of the most well-known, yet least acknowledged lords is the Twilight levels, as they resemble what feels like the arbitrary difficulty of Sen's Fortress, and act more as a gatekeeper than a gameplay experience. Much like Sen's Fortress, it appears near the beginning of the game, and is created from a series of increasingly difficult areas to go through, which are all meant to infuriate the player. The trick behind this lord is that they don't need to be present at all, and don't require the addition of minions as Sen's Fortress does. Sen's Fortress is made that much harder by the addition of reptilian enemies to discourage the player, but not so with Twilight. The Twilight level has been so expertly crafted that the many hills, slopes, and blind corners provide enough of a challenge for the player that adding enemies would just seem too much. The beauty of this level lies in its simplicity to cuck the player without having to physically do anything beyond existing. The mere fact that it exists is enough to drive anyone to start ripping their hair out after they run out of strokes for the 4th hole in a row. This series of 18 holes is made even more infuriating by not revealing the creator of this torture, and much like Sen's Fortress, never reveals what the creator actually looks like. However, Golf with Your Friends exceeds where Dark Souls fails by not even allowing the player the luxury of a name to connect their anger to. Though the player never sees Sen, they're clearly aware that he once existed. The lord which crafted Twilight remains so hidden that no one knows who they are. The player is left with this sense that life itself hates them, and is actively trying to stop them from exceeding, and thereby creates the ultimate cuck. Truly, the Lord of the Twilight may be the hidden supreme cuck lord, much like how Gale is the true final boss of Dark Souls 3, and trumps even the soul of Cinder. The famed cuck goat in the Cuck Mansion may seem like a Halloween trope, and in some ways it is, but upon deeper inspection, it holds some of the most interesting lore when compared against the Witches of Izalith and their pursuit of knowledge. Let's begin with the mansion itself. Its halls are littered with books which don't seem to be of any importance to the player, yet they hold the very key to this connection, and that's the knowledge that has been passed down through the ages and expanded upon to stop the player dead in their tracks. These books are not in fact set decoration. They are the results of generations of study and refinement to ensure that the player does not have an easy experience, and have been held specifically in the mansion so that none but the chosen may access the knowledge. These books can be seen as a connection to the Witches of Izalith through their own use of the Pyromancy tomes, which can be learned by anyone, but are only held by those who either do or once did preach the teachings of the Flame. Just as the witches pass their knowledge and tomes onto those they deem worthy, the teachings within the mansion are meant to do the same, and we see this through the creatures encountered within, the children and other minions. As the player travels through the mansion, they encounter a myriad of ghosts, axe-wielding children, and even a giant gorilla. These all represent the different forms the inhabitants of the land have taken, just as the servants of the Daughters of Chaos have taken different forms from giant spiders to trees. The mansion level features the largest amount of creature variety, because it's trying to emulate the variety of ways in which the knowledge has corrupted and affected them. They seek to guard their tomes against those who wish to either take or destroy them. Just as the pursuit of the First Flame has left the Witch of Izalith in an immobile state, so too has the seeking of powerful knowledge left the Cuck Goat immobile upon his stone. However, the creatures of this level are not the only things that have been designed to cuck. In fact, the very design of the mansion itself is meant to entice the players to attempt to weigh great risk against great reward. This all too often is a trap meant to lure players to their doom, whether that be through a jump over a bubbling cauldron, or the sliding across a massive spider's web. All these levels are intended to lull the player into a false sense of confidence and security, until that safety is utterly ripped away from them at the last second. This is similar to the corruption and overtaking of the flame and lava in the area taken over by the demons and pyromancers. The once vibrant city of Izalith has become forever altered due to the power which the Chaos holds. The mansion is merely a condensed version of this, and has been decidedly altered at the behest of its four-legged master, the one who himself seeks to stop the player on the 11th hole, the Cuck Goat. The Cuck Goat, assigned by the Cuck King himself, stands within his domain, a stalwart figure seeking to stop any intruder or invader to his library. Much like the Bed of Chaos boss fight from Dark Souls, the enemy does not move, and yet they cause massive frustration for the player. This is the very art of the Cuck. By simply doing nothing, they are able to cause tremendous pain and suffering. As previously mentioned, the lords can take whatever form they choose, and in this instance he's chosen the form of a goat, a creature which has been associated with Satanism and symbols of fire. The same fire that once corrupted the Witches of the Chaos and turned them into horrible monstrosities. Although the goat, much like Izalith herself, is a sympathetic figure, because they suffer constantly for their passion of ensuring their knowledge is not used improperly. The Cuck King himself may be the saddest tale of all, and he has the strongest connection to the Dark Souls series seen yet. Gwyn, the Lord of Flame, is a man so obsessed with his own power that he seeks to continue the Age of Fire at all costs. He fights against the player because he does not wish to see his kingdom fall. He fights the player tooth and nail with all his forces in desperate attempt to hold off as long as he can, so that he never becomes a faded memory. This was a man who sacrificed his own children to stop the player, and even though they failed, he continued to fight until he too threw away his own life, because he had no intention of living in the Age of Man or an Age of Fire where he does not reign supreme. In this way, the Cuck King is not so different. Throughout the levels of Candyland, the player encounters several more minor lords who work under the king, and act much in the same way as Gwyn's children did. We see more creatures during these levels than we have in any of the others, more characters which stand out as more than just throwaway minions. The Gingerbread Man, who serves as an ambassador for the king, is in many ways the representation of Ornstein and Smaug. He acts as a difficult barrier to stop the player from reaching their goal, and keeps them from taking the crown as best they can. The Gingerbread Man is accompanied by numerous other creatures throughout the map, who all serve the same purpose that Gwyn's knights did. They defend their lord against whatever threats may arise against him. Amongst these creatures is the secret Donut Ambassador, who tries and fails to stop the player. This donut holds some resemblance to the king himself, and is the best way for him to hide the fact that he's secretly the Cuck Prince. He's the secret son who has his life spared by the player. The king himself hides behind the levels and the gumball gauntlet which he's devised as his last line of defense. He sits there in utter shock to find his gates have been destroyed, his armies defeated, and his demise rolls towards him. His lack of movement portrays the terror he feels in his final moments, as he realizes that if this gauntlet does not repel the player, he will have nothing. In Dark Souls, Gwyn has the determination and anger to fight back, but the King of Candyland meets his fate very differently and simply accepts that the end is coming. He is all too aware of what's going to happen, and there is nothing more he can do to stop the player. He has nothing left. He merely sits upon his throne as he watches his kingdom crumble around him. The player is effectively destroying everything the king has built up, and imposes their will against this man who's literally powerless to stop them. The game may seem simple, but in reality it is the tale of an individual or group of people who have invaded this kingdom and began killing its citizens. They destroy the environment in their path of destruction, headed towards the kind ruler of the lands, until they finally reach the top where they face a challenge. Not even from the king himself, but from the final guard he enlisted. The player unravels everything that's been built over years of painstaking work, and rolls into the room to begin a new age. The Age of Golf, and through all their actions, to cuck the king of these lands, thereby themselves becoming the ultimate cuck. The main goal of both games is to defeat the kings of their lands and allow the player the option of taking their lands as their own. Both games serve as a reflection of human nature and the evil which resides within it. Much like being able to summon a mad spirit in Dark Souls, Golf with your friends allows you the option to enable collision. These mechanics both serve the same purpose. They allow the player to choose whether they want to help or hinder their fellow players. Putting the decision in their hands means that the human decides how they act. All too often, unfortunately, they will negatively affect other humans. This is the main point that Golf with your friends is trying to make. The ultimate cuck is the player because they choose to not only cuck the lords, but when allowed, cuck one another. Well, there you have it, the ultimate lore of Golf with your friends. We alluded to it like 2 years ago when we played Golf with your friends first, and here it is in its full glory. Huge thank you to Taylor. He actually wrote the entire script for this episode. I would not have been able to do this video without him, I don't think. He worked incredibly hard. He had less than a week to write this script, so huge thank you to Taylor. Couldn't have done it without you. If you got through this video and realized you have no idea what's going on, I don't blame you. The Golf with Your Friends videos were a while ago. Go back and watch those. I think there's only like 4 or 5 of them, but watching those will make this make a lot more sense, I think. This video also would not have been possible without the support of Sean Heatherly and all my patrons over at patreon.com/jardev. Sean got to request this because he backs at the top tier of the Patreon campaign. Anyway, hopefully everybody enjoyed this video. This is a pretty fun one to make, very Vaati style. Thank you guys very much for watching. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!